Hello, and welcome to another episode of Issues That Matter. And the thought occurred to me this morning, should I call it an episode? Because episodes generally are used, the word episode is generally used when you're talking about an adventure. Well, I'm here to tell you that doing this show is proving to be an adventure. And to those people that have been watching the show since its inception, thank you, and you have my apologies for some of the missteps and ridiculous things that I've done over the course of time, but that's part of an adventure. In any event, thank you very much. And today, I have the pleasure of having Ken Capron from the organization called Memory Works. And Ken, welcome.
Well, thank you for having me, Robert.
My pleasure. And Ken's going to be speaking about dementia today. And I would suspect we're probably going to be spending a good amount of time talking about the issues that we as a society and we as a community face. So let me open it up after I welcomed him. Now I'm going to ask him his first question. Ken, how did you get involved with working with the issue of dementia?
Well, my background is as a CPA and a Microsoft Certified Systems Engineer, and about 10 or 11 years ago, I started to notice that I was having a lot more trouble doing those things. But when I went to my doctor and said, "Well, why am I having some of these issues with memory or not being able to plan things out as well?" He basically said, "Well, you're just getting old." And doctors tend to say that, they don't acknowledge that that something else needs to be looked at. So I went along, and it got worse, and the doctor still kept saying, you're just getting old. I was 51 at the time. I didn't think I was old. But to make a long story short, through another physician referral, I was able to get some diagnostic studies done, and in that process, we discovered that I had a sleep issue, which was causing oxygen deprivation. So I ended up with a decline in memory capability and cognitive functioning as a result. And so I have a form of one of the 50 forms of dementia that are out there, but I have a cognitive impairment that sort of, it's hard to say, but it affects mostly executive functions. But there's 3 steps to cognition: input, processing, and output. And you have a cognitive impairment anytime any one of those 3 is impacted. So if you can't hear clearly, like if you're listening to TV at night and everything seems garbled, that's a good indicator that you should look further. Or if you're having trouble talking and you're finding yourself searching constantly for words or to remember events or activities, or especially people, that's another indicator. There's a whole bunch of indicators that say you should take a look. So I took a look, and when I started to look at different organizations, I talked to people at the Agency on Aging. I talked to people at the Alzheimer's Association, and a whole bunch of people. And being curious by nature, I did a lot of digging, and what I found out was that the system itself there's a huge system related to dementia care in every state, but certainly in Maine, and it's hard to get to know that system. It's hard to get to know all those pieces. So I became really, really fascinated with the opportunity that existed to find ways to bring that system more to a public eye. The whole issue of memory impairment and dementia is not well understood or well known in the public eye. And so that was a prime motivator for me to do something that wasn't already happening. And so I kind of, a friend of mine and I started a thing called Memory Cafes. Yep. Which was a social gathering for people who have concerns about memory loss, to just get together over a cup of coffee and maybe have a chat with other people who are in the same boat, having trouble with memory, or with a doctor who's not doing well by you as far as giving you a diagnosis. I mean, I've had people come to some of our memory cafes, of which we have 9 now, who were obviously had cognitive impairment, but the doctor didn't give a diagnosis to that effect. So they couldn't get the services that they needed because they didn't have the diagnosis.
Would you say that part of the challenge is getting people who might experience some cognitive difficulty and shy away from doing things where that cognitive difficulty might display itself, which puts them in a kind of like a shell?
There's a whole paradigm of symptoms that come with the dementia. One is, there's still quite a public stigma about dementia, because dementia used to mean a whole lot different than what it does now. Now it really does mean a cognitive impairment. It doesn't mean that you have strange behaviors, in the sense that you're not a harm to anybody just because you have dementia. You're not a threat. You're not what used to be looked upon as psychotic. People have come to really understand that dementia is a memory issue. It's a cognitive issue. And so a lot of people are still defining dementia as the old way and associating stigma with that. And while, and the industry itself is not fully adapted to the new definition, there's still a lot of people who are in the industry who are not sure how to interact with people with dementia. It's not always easy to talk with people with dementia, and so one of the things that they experience all the time is their friends slowly sort of disappear into the horizon because you lose that. You don't understand dementia, so you kind of back away. It's like anything you don't understand, you back away from it. So people who have memory impairments often find that they're become very isolated in time. They become less involved in the community because they don't have a way to get past that stigma. And so we've got a major piece of the population of people with dementia who are closet cognitive impairment based people, and they don't come out. They don't go see a doctor. Let's face it, in Maine we're just really independent. And I know that if I go see a doctor and say I'm not thinking well, that doctor could do things like get my license revoked, could prescribe very expensive medication, could do a whole lot of things.
Which could end up causing you more harm than good.
If it's not hurting you too bad, you just live with it. And we do a lot of that in Maine. That's human nature. I mean, and we're a very independent beast. We really don't like others to interfere too much, especially with our private part of our life, which behaviors and actions are very, very private for the most part, and how you behave at home is your business, not the world's.
Now, you've spoken of your cognitive difficulties that you've experienced.
Yes.
One of the things I want the viewers to know is that while he's experienced it, and one of the reasons why he's on the show today is because Ken is involved in a number of different things. Inactivity is not something that Ken very often experiences.
I don't stand still too long.
One of the things that I have a question for you, because I know you and I see each other at the AFIO meetings, which is the Association of Former Intelligence Officers. And anybody who knows me knows that I'm not attending these things because of my intelligence. But they need to know me to know that. In any event, I've heard you speaking about Watchdog.
Yeah, Watchdog is. I used to do fraud investigations, and actually all of my public accounting audit experience was there. I did a lot of stuff with fraud investigations, so I kind of got And I have a sixth sense for that, which really doesn't make me very popular, but I'm somebody who catches on to things.
Are you sure it's that doesn't make you popular?
You know, God only knows. But no, I mean, I do have a very strong interest in digging behind the scenes, because what you often hear, and any industry as big as the elder care, dementia care industry, there's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes, and I like to know what that is. Because I like to know when people are being really straightforward and honest and really caring about the consumer as opposed to somebody's pocket.
One of the things, thought, if you will, one of the thoughts that crossed my mind, sometimes frequently, sometimes too frequently, is when you're listening to a person talk, yes, listen to what they have to say, but be mindful of what they may not be saying. What should they be telling you that they're not telling you?
Well, this actually, having the experience in fraud emphasizes exactly that point. What people should pay attention to is not what people say or do, it's what they don't say and don't do. I mean, if you go up to your local banker and you reach out your hand to shake his hand and he won't shake your hand, that's a bad sign. That probably means you're not getting the loan no matter how hard you work at it. Well, you know, there's just little things. What people don't do and don't say is much more important than what they do or say.
I have the sense that there's a little bit of NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, involved.
What the heck?
Putting it very simply, it's just being able to read body language.
There's a lot of that, yeah, because people are very transparent. But I never heard body language abbreviated NLP.
It's a growing thing.
You've been getting more out of these AFIO meetings than I have. So anyway, to get back on point, I think that people need to know that the baby boomer generation, which is now moving into the over 65 category, the incidence of dementia and other elder-related issues is going to increase. Not as a percentage. It's just that we know it better. We now know it has a diagnosis other than senility. Where, I mean, it is not normal part of aging to be forgetful. And although most people have come to believe that, that's actually not quite true. And I point to people like a Betty White. Or there's a lot of very old people who have excellent memories. And so the point is that don't assume that just because you're getting forgetful that it's just senility. There's usually a medical cause for that. Need to take a look at it, need to talk to your doctor. And so in this industry, Bob, I mean, there's a bunch of people who think that they should be talking for you. And then there's the grassroots efforts, which is what MemoryWorks represents. And we're trying to create this grassroots effort so that people with either who know somebody with dementia or who have high functioning abilities and still have dementia have a voice when it comes to spending money, taxpayer money, to fund care. For example, somebody who needs assisted living in a facility, it's going to cost about $6,000 a month. Well, and I don't know if you have. The way you dress, I don't assume you've got thousands and millions of dollars stored aside.
That's a fairly safe assumption, yeah.
So when you run out of your money, and you're in an assisted living facility, when you run out of money, the state kicks in, Medicaid kicks in and takes over the bill, your bills, for your assisted living or long-term care facility. That's $6,000 a month. That's $72,000 a year, and we can't afford it right now. But you're looking at moving from 150,000 people over 65 to 300 to 350,000 people over 65 by the year 2020, and so the number of people demanding or needing that Medicaid coverage is going to skyrocket. and let's say there's 1,000 more people who need it at 72,000 a year, and that's just for the care. That doesn't take care of your medical bills. That's $72 million. Some of us are still wondering where that's coming from. Others are expecting that the government's going to pay that. That's where I get involved as a grassroots person. I need to get voices, out in front of people that say, "Wait a minute, we need to come up with some creative ideas on this."
I would say I would have to agree with you. We do need creativity, and that's one of the things that we seem to be lacking in society today. And those people who do try to be creative are often slapped down and being told,
If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
yeah, yeah, that's one of the things that they're told.
If it ain't broke, don't fix
Some
it.
of the things that they're told cannot be repeated on the air.
So this whole paradigm, I mean, it's going to require, with this huge jump in the population over 65, we need some people who to be very creative in finding less expensive ways to do this. Provide the same level of care, but there's got to be economies of scale. There's got to be systems, equipment, approaches, techniques, whatever, that can be improved or enhanced to cost less while providing the same service. And that's sort of where, like with MemoryWorks, we've started these memory cafes, which are no cost to the system at all, but they provide a place where people with dementia can meet and have discussions and learn more about what other people are doing to deal with the issues. Otherwise, they would either go without or the government would be paying for that through either support groups or whatever. We're doing it at no cost to the taxpayer.
At the risk of encroaching, and I might as well let the viewing public know, one of the things that has transpired today is I found out today that Ken is going to be the guest of Zaffi on her show next week. And while we're covering pretty much the same territory from a different perspective, I want to be careful not to encroach on what Zaffi plans on talking about. But I'm going to leave it up to Ken because Ken knows what Zaffi's going to want to talk about.
Well, Zaffi and I are going to talk more about the memory cafes because that's a national movement, grassroots movement. What I'm mostly interested, being real honest with you, there's just a lot of money that's going to be tied up in elder care and dementia care over the next 30 years. And listening to the economists who talk to groups about this specific issue, the aging issue, there needs to be stuff done. As Charlie Cogan, who is the economist who does an annual State of the State presentation at USM in Portland every year, as he said, what we because of the people who are moving out of the workforce, we're going to have this big gap in the workforce. We're not going to have enough workers in almost any industry. That's going to drive up wages. We should be thinking about how that's going to happen nowadays. But in addition to that, we also need to bring in about 7,500 new bodies to Maine every year. Well, last year we actually had a negative. We had more people leave the state than come into the state. We're moving into a scenario now where we're going to see more people die in any year than are born. That's a whole turnaround, not just in the Maine economy, but in the national economy and even the global economy. So the demand for services is going to go up. The number of people who are able to provide those services is going to go down. Supply and demand says it's going to
drive the cost of the services up.
It's going to drive the cost up. So we need to be creatively thinking about how to manage that. And there aren't two people in the world who agree on what the solutions to that are, but I'm the only one who seems to be exploring the government, the alternative to government funding, or any alternative to government funding. I think there needs to be a much more community-based involvement in this, a grassroots effort.
I would venture to say that yes, you are among the few, but there are probably more people than either you or I am aware of that share your concern but don't have a voice. They've been effectively, you might say, effectively muted by they're being pressured to not speak up, because if they do speak up, they're being told that they're radicals, they're none of their business, and stuff like that. And my word of caution is, don't be intimidated. Be involved. Don't be scared. Be concerned, but not scared. Because if you're scared, you're more subject to being silent.
One of the difficulties, Bob, about the dementia aspect of this baby boomer bubble, if you have a form of dementia, you have a hard time communicating your concerns in the first place, but then the establishment and the people who make money off of this illness don't take you seriously either. You know, they know that you can't speak as well as somebody else, but they aren't willing to give you the credit for that and say, well, you know, you can still think well, you still got good ideas. You know, we just need to help you get those ideas out on the table. That's not where they're at. They're at, well, I know what's best for you. They're at that point where they think they know what's best, so they aren't listening to the people who have dementia. So that leaves caregivers, you know, wives, children, even paid caregivers, as being the only remaining voice. And to be honest with you, if anyone has dealt with any major illness and you're a caregiver, it's a 36-hour day. That's a term used in the industry. I mean, you're working. If you're a caregiver, you're constantly being called upon by the person who's less than capable because of their needs. Now, if you're also one of those people who happens to be working and caregiving, you're pulled in two different directions. And you know, imagine if you're sitting at work and you've got your mom is at home and you're afraid that she's going to set something on the stove, turn on the burner, and fall asleep. Your concentration at work is really seriously impacted. If you're so you're constantly pulled, and you miss more time from work because you have to stay home because you know grandma is not doing well on that particular day, so you miss more time. Your employer gets on your back about missing time. There's not a lot of understanding in the workplace normally about that situation. So here's that dual role, employee, caregiver. Where's your priority? And everybody individually has to make that decision. But we need to see if we can't get businesses to be more understanding of that. But then add a third dimension. What if you're a couple who have children at home, and you have to bring in mom or dad or the mother-in-law or father-in-law to live on that end, so you have dual caregiving roles, plus an employment role, you become so overwhelmed that the last thing on your mind is speaking up to change the system. So so the people that we need to be speaking for the system should be the ones who are providing the services, but they're not speaking for the grassroots. They're speaking. They're the ones who need the money to run, so they're speaking, you know, for their wallets in many cases. Yeah, we'd all love to have a perfect system, but we've really become so money focused that we lose the grassroots. We lose the individual input into the needs.
And I would suspect that some of that is caused by people thinking that it is the way it is and there's nothing that they can do about it. They being the individual.
Well, you know,
if you get a group of individuals who think like that, all of a sudden you've got a significant number of people who are thinking that there's nothing they can do about it.
If you have volume in people, in supporters for any issue, you have a clear voice that can go to the legislature or can go to some of the lectures or presentations that are out there on these issues and be heard. But one or two people aren't going to get any voice. And to be honest with you, the legislature is so dysfunctional at this point that you always wonder if your voice will ever be heard. What you need is to get, as a grassroots organization, you need to get somebody who's going to lobby behind the scenes all the time. Well, that's expensive. And to be honest with you, most people with dementia don't have a lot of resources to just throw at some lobbying effort. So it's really hard to be heard, even as a group. As you know, if you went to the legislature with 100 people, I bet you the other side of the coin is there with 100 people of their own, because it's easy to get people to follow you if they're dependent upon you. So I'm getting a little bit off track, but the point is that it's hard in Maine to be an entrepreneur and come up with new ideas and get them taken seriously. But especially on this issue, there are not a lot of people who are saying, well, we could do this, we could do that, here's something new that we could try. It's more about funding existing programs and just keeping the same old going. I've had a chance to have some conversations with several people who are big on entrepreneurship in this state. People like Michelle Newhour from SMCC, and it's pretty well accepted that Maine is a if it's not broke, don't fix it state. Why change something that's not causing any harm?
Well, over the years. Why change it now?
Well, interestingly enough, and recently there's a grant that the Office of Aging and Disability Services just got this past fall for $560,000, and the discussions on how to use that money are all about existing stuff. Fixing existing stuff. It's not about creating new ways to make things faster, cheaper, or less expensive.
You mentioned grant. If I'm not mistaken, you and I had a conversation not that long ago that you spoke about a grant that Memory Works was working on. Can you speak to us about that a little bit, or is that?
That's the grant I'm most interested in. It's $566,000 grant that. There is a stakeholder group that doesn't include any grassroots representation. I'm the closest to grassroots that there is, and so they're going to make a decision on how this money is used. And the very first meeting we had of the stakeholders, I said very clearly at the meeting that we need to get more stakeholders involved. That's caregivers and patients, people who are on the front line. And that didn't get taken seriously, as far as I can see. Nobody has found a way to bring grassroots or shown an interest in bringing grassroots forward. I'm not sure why. I'm not sure that's the most important battle, but that was the first throwing my hat on the, in the ring and saying we need to pay attention to the grassroots when we spend money like this, substantial amounts of money like this. So when there's a grant, it's nice to know if somebody has a predetermined, preset mindset on how that should be spent. And I've been working very hard to try to figure that out, but $566,000, it's a 3-year grant. So you divide 566 by 3, and you're not talking a lot of money each year. What does that come out to? Like maybe $150,000 per year, maybe $166,000 a year. So that's 3 years, and then you got to spread that statewide. So, and there's 5 area agencies on aging. There's hospitals. There's different care consortiums. There's the in-home care people. There's the assisted living people, the long-term care people. All these folks are vying for this money. And if you divide the $150 a year by even 5 or 7 or 10 you dilute the money, the value of that grant so much. What can you do if you had $30,000 more a year in Aroostook County or in southern Maine? What can you do with $33,000 a year for 3 years? Nothing substantial to improve the existing system. At least that's my viewpoint. And again, that's my personal opinion from the grassroots effort. What I think will come out of it is some improvement, but we aren't going to get $566,000 of improvement in the dementia care field here in Maine unless they're willing to try something new. And you know, we've got proposals on the table. I haven't seen anyone else's ideas, but I think this is a good time, especially with DHHS, which has a reputation issue. This would be a good time to try to do something that would bring positive attention, measurable results, visible results that are out in the community that everybody could see, that ties into a national movement, a grassroots movement across America to develop these memory cafes.
Interestingly enough, if I may interrupt, in February, I believe around the 10th or 11th of February, we're going to be having Secretary Mayu of the Commissioner of DHHS on as a guest, speaking about the specific thing that we're going to be speaking about is the Medicaid expansion. And I would not guarantee that at some point in the conversation, this topic.
No, but you know, you're talking about the Medicaid expansion. Let's say, just for rough numbers, there are 2,000 more people who need their care paid for at $72,000 a year. Actually, let's make that $100,000 a year, because with doctors' bills and all the other stuff that goes on in dementia care, that's $100,000 a year. A couple of thousand people who get that. That's 2,000 times 100,000. That's $200 million. Without the Medicaid expansion, that's coming out of yours and my pocket 100%. With the Medicaid expansion, Medicaid picks up, the federal government picks up a good chunk of that $200 million. That may change what your view on Medicaid expansion, but I have to say that
my view on Medicaid expansion.
So I have to say that as concerned as I am that it may cost taxpayers more at some point, not doing is going to cost taxpayers a lot more. Sorry if I took your show away. I'll be glad to sit in for Mayhew if you want.
Don't make comments like that, because you never know when I'm going to call you on it.
I'll be here if you want me.
Because that is as with so many other issues that we face today. They are very, very complex, and one of the old phrases that I recall from my younger days is, "For every yin, there's a yang," and for every positive thing, there's another side to it. And the same can be said for every negative thing. There's another side to it. What we lack today, in my view, is having good public discussion about it. And if there's one thing that I would like to see germinate from this conversation, is people talking about it more. Nothing will happen if people are not talking about it. Well, let me rephrase that. Nothing good will happen if people are not talking about it and getting involved. And it's through that involvement and that conversation that ideas are born.
You know, it's interesting you mention that, because I had at one point started an effort to have civil discourse groups meet once a month just to talk about whatever issues were on the table, whatever the current issues were. And although there was some interest, it was hard to get people to come out to those. Because once you get home in the evening, You can't do it during the day when you're working. So when you get home in the evening, the minute you settle into your routine, you're in that routine for the duration. It's really hard unless you have kids in school that you're worried about or something. It's really hard to get people out to talk about issues. But there was a day when the barber shop was a great place to discuss issues. Coffee shops, and certainly we have a lot of coffee shops.
All you have to do is watch the Andy Griffith show.
Yeah.
And see
so,
examples of that.
so in many ways, these memory cafes are a way to get people who are dealing with a specific issue to kind of come together over a cup of coffee, and we talk about how we're managing, how we're coping with the existing situation. But I did start to say earlier, in this grant, in the executive summary of this grant, DHHS, Office of Aging and Disability Services, makes a very strong declaration that the system we've got is unsatisfactory. Very strong statement. This system is just not working well. That was their word, unsatisfactory, uncoordinated, ineffective, inefficient. They acknowledge it. My interest as a grassroots person is, do you acknowledge it enough to try to change what's not working into something or try something new that might work? And it's that might work that scares them. They know the existing system is broken, but they're more reluctant to take the leap of faith to try something new, which could expand the value of that 566. I'm proposing a plan that could utilize a lot of private resources that the government doesn't have access to. And I'm obviously being a spokesperson for my plan. But they're reluctant to try that. It might work, as opposed to, we know that this is working or not working, but we're familiar with it. And what's human nature? Human nature is to stick with what's familiar, whether it's working or not. And so entrepreneurs in any aspect in this state have to climb this hill, and fight this battle on almost any time they want to bring about any change. That it's just hard to change a system that's broken, or that whether it's broken or not, it's just hard to change any system.
Yes, it is, and I absolutely agree with you on that. And I take it one step further, and I say, in order to think that the system may ever change, we've got to have ongoing conversation and ongoing discussion, not just discussion from one direction, but discussion from multiple directions. And it's out of that conversation and that discussion that ideas can be born.
Well, I want to say to your audience that right now that discussion is being had by those people who benefit from the system financially. They're the ones who are having the discussion at the stakeholders groups and the organizational meetings and all this stuff. It's the people who stand to take more money in with the movement of the baby boomers into this situation. They're the ones who are speaking. You, whether you're 60 or 100, you need to come forward and start a voice, a grassroots effort to get heard about what you want the future of elder care to be like in Maine, the future of dementia care. We need your voice. Without that, the people who make money off it are going to make more money off of it, and they're going to continue to control the outcomes. Which it's worked from a government standpoint. That's the way government works. But we're smarter than that. As Mainers, we're known for being resourceful. And I suspect if we wanted to, we could find solutions that aren't going to, set up more expectations for the government to pay even more, which, we stood here a little bit earlier when Zaffi was here and said, where's this going to come from? Where is the money going to come from to do this? We're already shorted on every social program at the state level. We're already short on money. We've
And
made
part of the problem is that it's not just at the state level, very definitely at the federal level as well.
absolutely.
And despite what people may think, we are not functioning with an endless stream of money.
China's going to call our hand at some point. They hold 40% of our debt nationally. And now you notice, by the way, that Maine is getting more connected to China, and the governor's making a trip over there to kind of build relations. I hope we don't mortgage Maine to the Chinese.
Well, if you're in desperate need of money,
you go
where the money is.
Yeah.
Now, then that's a concept that I've been thinking about for quite some time now. Yes, we do owe a lot of money to the Chinese. Well, in a sense, that increases the motivation on the part of the Chinese to do what they can to keep our economy afloat. Because of the amount of money that we owe them, if our economy were to collapse, it would wreak significant damage on their economy. But that's a dangerous road to travel, and I certainly don't want to have to travel that road. But there are very, very, very few issues today, either on the global scale, the national scale, even the local scale. Very, very issues that can be answered with simple answers. Very few questions that can be answered with simple answers. Everything is so complex. Everything is tied in with something else. And the amount of interrelationship is incredible.
Well, sometimes you wonder, and I don't want. There's a whole political discussion here that could be had about how we got there that way.
I don't want to go down that road right now.
But because especially
on the show,
one of the frequent key phrases is KISS, keep it simple. We do have an understanding that it's important to keep things simple, yet we keep making them more complex. Why does the legislature have to add 2,000 bills every session? Do we really need that many more laws every year? Is something changing that we don't? Don't get me started on this, but
yeah, you wouldn't be. You're not the only one that can get started on that. And I don't think we have the time to do that.
So this is a good time for the state to look at ways to simplify and conserve. And there are ways to provide the same level of service without costing more money. I strongly believe that. Now, I have a healthcare background. I was the director of accounting at Med for 6 years. So I know a lot about the healthcare costs and all that stuff. And I know that there are ways that we can simplify and conserve money and provide equal or better care. I just ordered a book recently that I because I'm very interested in entrepreneurship and where that's going in Maine, because that is the future. If we can't get a good entrepreneurship program going in Maine, we're going to be in a bad place economically. But the name of the book was First Break All the Rules. And that's where entrepreneurship really comes in, is you can't create something new if you're following old rules.
And when you have a legislature that is passing 2,000 bills a year, every bill they pass is giving you another rule.
It's another rule
that you have to follow. And we can't keep track of the bills that have already been passed.
We are overwhelmed.
We're totally overwhelmed. And I don't want to go down that road because now you're getting the hair on the back of my
Now
neck.
You know one of the major causes of dementia is when politicians decide to run. That's an early symptom.
Well,
yeah, it's one of my favorite sayings. If somebody decides to run for office, have them check with their doctor first. It could be dementia.
We've covered a good amount of ground today.
Good start. There's a lot more to go.
That's all we can expect this show or any show to be, is a start. Because from here, who knows where it's going to go. I think in my mind, what's bouncing around in the caverns is where it's going to go is totally unknown. We do know where it's going to end up unless people get involved. Where that involvement will take us, again, I don't know. Nobody knows. But we do know where we will end up if nobody does get involved.
Absolutely. And I think last week I suggested to one of the conferences I was at that we should form the League of Pissed Off Old Voters. And we need to do something. Remember the League of Pissed Off Young Voters that Justin Alfon founded in Portland?
I'm not that old.
But it worked for them. Look where he is today. So we need a League of Pissed Off Old Voters.
Okay, well, we've heard that phrase often enough now. Thank you very much.
Le pouf.
And on that note, I want to take this opportunity to let you folks know about some of the things that might be coming up in addition to, and I have to apologize to Commissioner Mayhew for saying Secretary Mayhew. She's not a secretary, she's a commissioner. I'm thinking about the federal level where Secretary of HHS, it's Commissioner Mayhew. I think we've got some things to talk about with the commissioner. I was shocked to hear that when I called to find out who we can get to speak about Medicaid expansion from that perspective, from the opposition's perspective, I was shocked to hear Commissioner Mayhew would love to appear. So it's an opportunity.
I'm shocked that you were able to get the commissioner on.
It wasn't from anything that I did other than call the State House and say, who can we get? I've already had a show on to have somebody who speak of the positive things about expanding Medicaid. And I called the State House to find out who can I get, thinking that I would get a local person, to come and speak about the opposition, and they said Commissioner Mayhew would very much like to be on your show.
That's impressive.
And
when you're going to have Sebelius on?
Excuse me?
When you're going to have Sebelius? National. I mean,
I don't
isn't
think
this
so.
a national show?
I learned a long time ago, and I've lived long enough to know that you never know what the future's going to hold. But any more than I thought that I would ever have a television show.
There you go.
Even at this level. In any event, Ken, I want to thank you very much for coming in.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. And I hope I did not encroach too much on what Zaffy's going to be speaking to you about.
No, we're going to be talking about the memory cafes.
What I will do is I will make sure that I tell Zaffy that she owes me something here because I got you warmed up. I got you primed to be a fabulous guest on her show.
Be careful how you describe that. Maybe find some more, some different words. I got Ken warmed up for you. It's not that cozy.
Next week on the show, we're going to have a doctor who lives in, I believe, Cape Porpoise, who he and along with 15 of his medical comrades, you might say, were in India on an outreach program providing health care to the some indigent people in India. And he's going to be speaking about the advantages of outreach and opportunities that might be out there and what it is that they do. And this doctor, I came to know about this doctor through the church on the Cape, which I attend, and it just, what I heard fascinated me, and I thought it'd be good topic for the show. So he'll be coming up next week on the show, and he'll be telling us about his experiences in India, which I would venture to say are probably going to be a lot different than anything that we might experience, at least in this part of the country. Maybe if you go to the real rural parts of the country, like Appalachia, you might see something that might come close. I don't know whether it would ever hit the same chords. You
Hey,
might
try
say.
northern Maine. We could use some outreach to northern
Well,
Maine.
Maine is the most rural state in the country.
They've got.
And on that note, I think we best sign off. So for you folks out there, I want to thank you again for watching, and hopefully you've written down the email address of Issues That Matter, because I really am interested in getting some feedback from our viewers on the show. And I have every intention of being on this show for quite some time, or as long as they want me. But I want to continually improve it. Hopefully you've noticed some improvement as the show has developed. I want that improvement to continue. With that, I want to wish you all a very safe day, a very happy day, and most of all, make it a productive day for yourself. Take care. See you next week.